Are you new to set 8 and looking to push far into the new ranked season? Or maybe you've been playing on the PBE all the time and you do feel pretty confident. Regardless of which side you're on, I think I have a great list of 10 different mechanics that you need to know before the set releases, because they can make or break your entire game. Are you ready? Let's start with number 1. Which Aphelios weapon should you take? Now, in case you don't know what I'm talking about, Aphelios is a new legendary unit and pretty much the strongest AD carry in the late game. He has a unique gimmick that you can select 3 different weapons when you place him on the board, each with a different ability. This is a bit of a confusing mechanic if you're starting out, but there is an easy way to simplify everything. We have the left, the middle, and the right weapon. The left weapon will be your main AoE DPS weapon. When Aphelios reaches full mana, he shoots out a wave of magic damage in a large cone, and everyone who got hit will end up receiving a second shot with a high amount of physical damage. If you want to focus on AoE damage or try to reach the enemy backline, then yeah, this is your weapon of choice. The middle weapon is your main utility weapon. When Aphelios casts, he will deal damage in a small radius and stuns everybody who gets hit. When do you want to select this? Well, maybe you're running Zamira as your main carry. You know, your Aphelios might still be 1 star, maybe he doesn't have any items, and you're pretty much just adding him for sure shot. This is the scenario when you want to go for utility. The right weapon is your main burst DPS weapon. With this weapon, he will throw out a bunch of chakrams to nearby targets, which will usually hit the enemy frontliner, and this weapon is a great way to get rid of extremely strong tanks. For example, if your opponent is running a Mecha Prime as his frontline. The AoE weapon might not be enough for these types of scenarios, so focusing your damage onto one spot will end up having better results. Now you might find yourself in a spot where you started out with the middle weapon for utility, and now you want to use the left one because you found some items. This brings us to mechanic number 2, how to change the weapons. If you selected a weapon and you want to change it, all you have to do is put Aphelios on your bench and put him back in. This will reset the weapon selection, allowing you to be more flexible against your upcoming opponent. Maybe against the Star Guardian player, you want to go with the left weapon and snipe the enemy Talia, and against the Jax player, you want to swap to the right weapon so you can focus your damage on the enemy main carry. For number 3, we have to take a closer look at one of the new mechanics, the hero augments. You might have seen the champion icons when you select one, which will tell you what you and your opponent selected. But as a player, and especially as a viewer, this doesn't really tell you which augment everyone went for. Every unit has both a carry and a support augment, and they play out completely differently. This is why Riot added a visual indicator below the hero unit. For example, here we can see a green-yellowish color, which indicates that the unit has the supportive hero augment. The carry version will appear as more of a purple color. If you pay attention to this mechanic, it is much easier to tell with a single glance which augment was taken without having to right-click on the enemy hex core and try to figure out everything one by one. Let's stay with hero augments for number 4 and figure out how to get them. I believe 95% of your games will have a hero augment and they can only appear once. This means if you have a hero augment selection in stage 2, you cannot receive a hero augment in stage 3 or 4 anymore. There is a very useful augment tree telling you which path you're currently on, which can definitely be helpful because sometimes you know with a 100% guarantee that your stage 4 augment will be hero augment selection and you can prepare beforehand. Similar to neutral augments, you can manipulate them to an extent. Again, you should consider stage 2 as completely random, but your board in stage 3-1 and 4-1 will end up deciding which heroes you can receive based on your active traits. So a quick example, if you have the duelist trait active, you can receive duelist heroes to the corresponding tiers. Oh yeah, I guess I should mention everybody has the same tiers. So, you know, there will never be a scenario where somebody gets a legendary hero augment and you don't. But you know what, there is so much more to say about hero augments, and I think I want to cover this in a different video. For now, all you have to remember is that your active traits in the previous round will decide which hero augments can show up. Our next mechanic has to do with brawlers. Now these set 8 brawlers are not the brawlers we know and love from the previous sets. Usually they would give an HP buff to everyone, but this isn't the case anymore. In this set, brawlers will receive a higher HP percentage for themselves. This is quite the difference because, for example, if you give a Vamox to a brawler, that brawler will receive more HP than if you would give this item to a different non-brawler unit. Speaking of beloved traits, do you remember Darkstar? Or maybe you remember the Voracious Appetite mutants. Both of them ended up giving a buff based on ally units dying. This was heavily abused by taking augments like Phony Frontline or spamming a bunch of Zzrots to increase the amount of units on your board, which resulted in a huge buff for your main carry. Well, we do have a similar mechanic in the new admin trait and also in the Fiddlesticks passive, which gives him AP for every allied unit that was taken down. Now, you probably are putting 1+1 together and figure out that we can do the same thing again as we did in previous sets, but I have some bad news to share. Well, for some people, this might be good news. None of these interactions work anymore in set 8. And I mean none of them. No target dummies, no Zzrot, no clones from LeBlanc, no Woodland Charm, no Prankster dummies, no Zekblob, no Syndra throws, nothing. The only units that will count are units that you yourself placed on the board, and that's it. On a completely different note, let's take a look at the AntiHill effect in set 8. It is a bit weaker than it used to be, but it's still very useful. You might find yourself in a position in which you're facing a unit with an insane amount of HP or just a lot of sustain, and your team is just incapable of dealing enough damage. This is where Gangplank and Aurelian Soul are the units you're looking for. Gangplank's ability will reduce healing, while Aurelian will just straight up apply a Morello effect on every unit that got hit by his ability. Thankfully, Aurelian is a threat unit, which makes him extremely easy to take into your comp without sacrificing anything, and giving you the anti-heal effect that you were looking for. But do keep in mind, this means Morello is among the worst items you could ever build on him, and an item you might want to avoid in the early game if you're looking to play Aurelian later. Next up, let's move our attention to the front line, and more specifically, Echo. When he is full mana, he will dash behind his target, giving himself a large shield, taunting everyone nearby, and when his shield breaks, he will deal a small amount of magic damage and apply an attack speed debuff to everyone who got hit. Quite a lot of mechanics for one ability, but the most important part here is the dash and the taunt. If you position Echo in front of the enemy Sejuani, he will dash behind her, and this will result in her stun being cast on the wrong side of the map, pretty much making her worthless. There are a few abilities in the game that are based on the auto-attack target, and Echo is just the perfect unit to completely mess them up. I recommend trying to fit in Echo in most of your comps, and if possible, try giving him a Stoneblade, since he will taunt a large number of enemies, which will just give you infinite value. On the number 9 spot, we have Hecarim. This Trojan horse spawns if you activate the Heca trait, and it will transport one of your units to the enemy backline. This is the closest we have to the Assassin trait, but there is a small mechanic here you should know that will make your life a whole lot easier. Hecarim will always try to connect to a unit which is on the right side, 1 hex below him, but let's assume a situation where the opponent is swapping his carry from one side to another at the very last second. If you're looking to match him, you need to be fast. The best way to do this is by only moving Hecarim instead of the connected unit. This way both of them will get moved together, and it's much easier to manage your positioning and timing. On the last spot we have the crit rework and all of its changes. Crit used to work quite differently. For example, Infinity Edge gave you enough crit to reach 100% crit chance, and it converted every percentage of critical strike chance into critical strike damage. Combining Jeweled Gauntlet together with Infinity Edge was a pretty great item build, since Jeweled Gauntlet would give you spell crit, Infinity Edge gives you 100% critical strike chance, and everything that's left over gets converted into more damage. This is not the case anymore for set 8. Infinity Edge got a rework, and it will now give you percentage AD, 35% critical strike chance, and grant spell crit. Jeweled Gauntlet will pretty much do the exact same, except it gives AP instead of AD. Combining the two isn't really that good of an item build anymore, but this isn't a problem because of another change made regarding Sparring Glove items. Dodge got completely removed, and every Sparring Glove item will now grant critical strike chance. If you combine an Infinity Edge with a Last Whisper and a QSS, this would put you at 100% critical strike chance and also give you a lot of utility. However, there are still ways you might end up with more than 100% crit chance. Maybe you're running for recon, or you pick the Augment Jeweled Gauntlet. In these specific cases, everything is being converted with a 2-to-1 ratio. For example, if you ended up with a total of 140% critical strike chance, the 40% will get converted into 20% bonus damage. If you remember this list, I think you're pretty well prepared for the Set 8 Ranked release on the 7th December. Do you want to know more about cool TFT stuff? Why not subscribe and catch all the YouTube videos, or just ask your question in person on my Twitch stream at leduck TFT. I hope you learned something, and see you next time.